Kethavar stood before the massive view screen in the Galactic Defense Council chamber. The blue-green world of Earth slowly rotated before him, looking peaceful from this distance. He had studied many worlds in his 40 cycles as a military observer, but this one was different. This one was home to the humans. "Your mission is simple," General Vexthar said behind him. The old Carillian's voice carried the weight of countless battles. "Observe these humans in combat. Document their methods. Report their effectiveness." Kethavar turned from the screen, his 4 eyes focused on the datapad in his scaled hands. The information about humans was surprisingly limited for a species that had just joined the galactic community. They were young, that much was clear. Their technology was basic compared to most civilizations. Yet somehow they had volunteered to fight the Devourers. The Devourers had been consuming star systems for 300 cycles. Entire civilizations had fallen to their endless hunger. The parasitic creatures fed on both matter and energy, leaving dead worlds in their wake. Every military analyst agreed that stopping them would require massive coordinated fleets and superior technology. So why had these primitive humans offered to help? "Sir," Kethavar said, "the humans have only had space travel for a few hundred of their years. Their weapons are simple projectile and energy systems. What makes the Council think they can contribute to this war?" General Vexthar's mandibles clicked in what Kethavar recognized as amusement. "That is exactly what we want you to find out." The humans requested to join the war effort within days of learning about the Devourers. No other species has ever volunteered to fight them without being directly threatened. The transport ship that carried Kethavar to the human vessel was efficient, but unremarkable. Standard galactic design with basic shields and engines. As they approached the human fleet, Kethavar expected to see the usual formation of sleek warships arranged in defensive patterns. Instead, he saw chaos. The human ships moved in seemingly random patterns. Some flew in tight groups while others spread out across vast distances. Their designs were crude but functional, with visible weapon systems mounted on the outside of their hulls. Everything about their fleet screamed amateur, compared to the elegant vessels of established galactic powers. The transport docked with the human flagship, a massive vessel called the Teguk. As the airlock opened, Kethavar checked his recording equipment one final time. The Council needed detailed observations, and he would provide them. The first human he met was Captain Jinwoo Park. The man was shorter than Kethavar expected, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He wore a simple uniform with minimal decoration, but there was something about his presence that commanded attention. "Welcome aboard," Captain Park said, in heavily accented galactic standard. His smile seemed genuine, but Kethavar noticed how the man's eyes never stopped moving, constantly scanning for threats. "We are honored to have an observer from the Council." Kethavar was introduced to the senior staff. Tactical Officer Minji Kim was a small woman with quick movements and an intensity that reminded him of a predator. She spoke rapidly about weapon systems and targeting solutions, using terms that Kethavar had to look up in his database. Medical Officer Hyunwoo Lee was different. He was calm and soft-spoken, but when he discussed treating combat injuries, his voice carried a disturbing enthusiasm. He seemed almost excited about the challenge of keeping soldiers alive in battle. "The Devourers use biological weapons," Lee explained as they toured the medical bay. "Toxins that shut down nervous systems, parasites that eat their host from inside. But we have developed new treatments, new ways to keep fighting even when injured." The medical bay itself was puzzling. It was larger than necessary for a ship this size, with equipment that seemed designed for treating massive casualties. Most civilized species tried to minimize combat injuries through superior tactics and technology. The humans appeared to be planning for extensive damage. Engineer Su-Young Han showed Kethavar through the ship's systems. The human technology was indeed primitive, but it was also remarkably robust. Where other species used elegant solutions, the humans built everything to survive massive damage and keep functioning. "Our ships may be not pretty," Han said with a laugh, "but they hard to kill. We learn to make things that work when everything go wrong." That evening, Kethavar attended a briefing about the upcoming battle. The tactical display showed the Kepler 4E42 system, where a large Devourer hive fleet had established itself around a gas giant. Standard doctrine would call for a careful approach, probing attacks to test enemy defenses, and a gradual assault using superior numbers. The human battle plan was different. "We go in fast and hard," Captain Park explained to his officers. "Hit them before they can adapt to our tactics. Use their size against them." Minji Kim added targeting data to the display. "The hive ships are massive but slow. If we can get inside their formation, their own weapons cannot target us without hitting each other." Kethvar raised a concern. "The Devourers use psychic attacks to paralyze enemy crews. How will you counter this?" The humans looked at each other and began laughing. Not the nervous laughter of soldiers facing danger, but genuine amusement. "Observer Kethvar," Captain Park said, "we tested this already. The Devourers tried their fear attacks on our border colonies. Did not work as expected. What happened?" Kethvar asked. "The colonists got angry and started hunting them," Minji Kim said with a grin. "Turned out human response to being scared is not paralysis, is violence." That night Kethvar reviewed his notes. The humans seemed confident, perhaps overly so. Their tactics were aggressive to the point of recklessness. Their equipment was functional but crude. Their understanding of galactic warfare was limited, yet there was something about them that troubled him. The way they talked about the upcoming battle was strange. Other species approached combat with grim determination or noble purpose. The humans seemed almost excited about it. He watched through his quarters porthole as the human fleet moved through hyperspace toward the battle zone. The ships maintained their chaotic formations, but Kethvar began to notice patterns. The apparent randomness might actually be a complex tactical arrangement that he did not understand. Tomorrow they would face the Devourers, and Kethvar would get his answers about human combat effectiveness. He settled into his sleeping alcove, trying to ignore the sounds of human crew members in the corridors. They were not preparing for battle with quiet prayers or meditation like most species. They were singing. The alarm that woke Kethvar was not the standard battle alert he expected. Instead of the calm, measured tones used by civilized military forces, the human ship echoed with loud, driving music that seemed designed to increase heart rate and aggression. Kethvar rushed to the bridge, his recording equipment secured to his harness. The main screen showed the Kepler 442 system ahead, dominated by a massive gas giant surrounded by dark shapes that could only be the Devourer hive fleet. "Contact in 30 minutes, Tactical Officer Minji Kim announced. Her voice carried an excitement that Kethvar found disturbing. Most soldiers he had observed showed tension or fear before battle. Kim sounded like she was looking forward to it. Captain Jinwoo Park stood at the command station studying the tactical display. The Devourer fleet was enormous, easily 3 times the size of the human force. Massive bioships floated in defensive formations around smaller vessels that pulsed with organic light. "Observer Kethvar," Park said without turning around. "You wanted to see how humans fight. Today you learn." The approach to combat was unlike anything Kethvar had documented. Instead of the careful advance he expected, the human fleet accelerated toward the enemy at maximum speed. Ships that should have maintained safe distances began closing to ranges that would allow the Devourers to use their most dangerous weapons. "Sir," Kethvar said, "standard doctrine suggests a more cautious approach. The Devourers have psychic weapons that can disable entire crews." Pilot Donghyun Choi looked back from his station with a wide grin. "Observer, you worry too much. We already know what happens when they try their mind tricks on humans." The first contact came when the human fleet entered extreme weapons range. The Devourer hive ships began emitting the psychic pulses that had paralyzed dozens of galactic fleets. Kethvar felt the wave of artificial fear wash over him, designed to trigger panic responses in most intelligent species. Around him, the human crew began laughing. "There it is," Minji Kim said, checking her instruments. "Right on schedule. Fear pulse at maximum intensity." Instead of showing signs of panic or paralysis, the human crew seemed energized. Heart rates increased, but so did their focus and coordination. Kethvar watched in amazement as the psychic attack that should have disabled them instead made them more effective. "How is this possible?" Kethvar asked. Medical Officer Hyunwoo Lee, who had arrived on the bridge to monitor the crew, explained while keeping his eyes on his scanner. "Human evolution different from most species. We come from a world where everything tried to kill us. Fear make us fight harder, not freeze up." The battle began in earnest as the human fleet closed to combat range. Kethvar expected to see the precise, calculated exchanges of fire that characterized civilized warfare. Instead, he witnessed something that could only be described as organized chaos. Pilot Dongyan Choi threw the massive warship into a series of maneuvers that should have been impossible for a vessel of its size. He was not just evading enemy fire, he was actively seeking out the most dangerous positions, flying through gaps in the Devourer formation that barely provided clearance for the ship's hull. "This is incredible," Choi shouted over the noise of weapons fire and engine strain. "They are so slow compared to the simulator battles back home." The weapon systems operated by Minji Kim fired continuously, but not at the methodical pace of most military engagements. Instead, she was targeting multiple enemies simultaneously, switching between weapon systems with a speed that made Kethvar dizzy to watch. "Target-rich environment," she announced with obvious pleasure. "Gunner teams free fire on anything that moves. Let's see how many we can take out before they figure out what we are." Engineer Soo-Young Han worked at her station with the same strange enthusiasm, rerouting power systems to maximize weapon output. When Kethvar pointed out that she was drawing power from life support and environmental systems, she just smiled. "We not need full life support during battle," she said. "Rather have bigger guns. Can always fix life support later if we win." The casualness with which she discussed potentially fatal system failures was deeply unsettling to Kethvar. Most species prioritized crew safety above all else. The humans seemed willing to accept enormous risks for minor tactical advantages. The true shock came when the Devourers adapted their psychic attacks. Instead of projecting fear, they began broadcasting waves of despair and hopelessness. Mental attacks that had broken the will of entire planetary defense forces. The human response was immediate and terrifying. "Now they made us angry," Captain Park said, and his voice carried a coldness that made Kethvar's scales prickle with instinctive fear. Across the bridge, every human crew member showed the same transformation. Their casual excitement became something darker and more focused. They were not just fighting anymore, they were hunting. Sergeant Woojin Nam, the ship's security chief, appeared on the bridge wearing combat armor and carrying weapons that looked primitive but effective. "Captain, boarding shuttle's ready. Let us get close to one of their big ships." "Boarding shuttles?" Kethvar asked in disbelief. "You plan to board a Devourer vessel? That is suicide. They have defensive systems that can digest organic matter." Nam grinned, showing teeth that reminded Kethvar uncomfortably of a predator. "Observer, you think too much like prey. We think like hunters. Besides, our equipment designed to work in hostile environments." Kethvar watched through the tactical display as human boarding craft launched toward a massive hive ship. Instead of approaching carefully and seeking weak points in the defenses, they accelerated directly at the most heavily defended sections of the enemy vessel. The boarding parties cut through the alien hull, using tools that seemed to cause more damage than necessary. When the Devourers tried to repel them with acid sprays and toxic gases, the humans simply sealed their suits and kept fighting. Through the ship's communication system, Kethvar could hear the boarding teams. They were not giving tactical reports or calling for support. They were whooping with joy as they carved through the enemy ship's interior. "This is Team 3, came Nam's voice over the radio. "We found their power core. Placing charges now. These things really do not know how to build proper defenses." The explosion that followed destroyed the entire front section of the Devourer hive ship. But instead of retreating, the human boarding teams had somehow survived and were moving deeper into the vessel. "How are they still alive?" Kethvar asked. "Humans very hard to kill," Captain Park replied, watching the tactical display with obvious satisfaction. "Evolution teach us to survive things that would kill most species. Also, we prepare for worse than this." The battle continued for hours, but the outcome became clear within the first 30 minutes. The Devourers, who had consumed dozens of civilizations, were being systematically destroyed by a force half their size using inferior technology. The difference was not in equipment or tactics. The difference was in attitude. Where other species fought to defend or survive, the humans fought because they enjoyed it. They took risks that terrified Kethvar, but those same risks allowed them to achieve results that should have been impossible. As the last Devourer ship exploded under concentrated human fire, Kethvar realized he had witnessed something that would change his understanding of warfare forever. The humans had not just won. They had enjoyed every moment of it. 3 days after the first battle, Kethvar thought he understood what he had witnessed. The humans had shown unusual aggression and risk-taking behavior, but they had won decisively against a superior force. His report would note their effectiveness and recommend further cooperation. Then the second wave of devourers arrived. The alarm systems throughout the fleet activated as massive ships dropped out of hyperspace. At the edge of the system, Kethvar counted at least 50 vessels, including several superhives that dwarfed anything they had faced before. This was not a patrol or advance force. This was a full invasion fleet. Well, Captain Jinwoo Park said from his command chair, this should be interesting. Kethvar stared at the tactical display in horror. The approaching fleet was 5 times larger than the one they had just defeated. Even with the reinforcements that had arrived from Earth, the humans were outnumbered 10 to 1. Captain, Kethvar said, you should withdraw immediately. Contact the Galactic Council for support. This force is too large to engage. Around the bridge, the human crew began making preparations for battle with the same casual enthusiasm they had shown before. Nobody seemed concerned about the overwhelming odds they faced. Observer, Tactical Officer Minji Kim said while updating her targeting systems. Humans not good at running away. We better at making other things run away. The fleet-wide communication channel crackled to life as Captain Park addressed all ships. All vessels, this is Admiral Park. We have multiple hive ships approaching. Recommend maximum aggression protocols. Show these things what happens when they bring friends to a human fight. Admiral Park. Kethvar realized that during the previous battle, the human had been promoted to overall fleet command. The speed of his advancement was unprecedented in galactic military history. Sir, Kethvar said, surely you do not intend to engage this fleet directly. Standard tactics would require a fighting withdrawal to draw them into a prepared ambush. Engineer Soo-Young Han looked up from her console with a puzzled expression. Why would we run? We just figured out how their ships work. Now we get to try new ideas on bigger targets. The approach to the second battle was different from the first. Instead of the chaotic attack pattern they had used before, the human fleet formed into what appeared to be standard battle formations. Kethvar felt relieved until he realized what was actually happening. The humans were not adopting defensive positions. They were organizing themselves for a coordinated assault on a force 10 times their size. All ships, Admiral Park announced. Remember what we learned last time. Fear makes them weak, pain makes them stupid, and they cannot adapt fast enough to match human tactics. Let us teach them what real predators look like. The Devourer fleet approached in the massive wall formation that had crushed so many galactic defense forces. Their ships moved with the slow, inevitable advance of creatures that had never experienced defeat. Psychic attacks began long before weapons range. Waves of terror designed to break enemy morale before the fighting started. On the bridge of the Taeguk, something extraordinary happened. Lieutenant Yoonji Yu, the communications officer, began singing. It started as a low humming, barely audible over the bridge noise. But as the psychic attacks intensified, her voice grew stronger. Kethvar's translator identified the song as something called Arirang, an ancient human folk melody. One by one, the other crew members joined in. The effect was immediate and profound. Instead of the fear and despair that the Devourer attacks were designed to create, the human crew became more focused and determined. The singing spread through the ship's communication system, and soon the entire fleet was harmonizing across dozens of vessels. What is happening? Kethvar asked Medical Officer Hyunwoo Lee. Human bonding response, Lee explained, his voice calm despite the approaching battle. When faced with impossible odds, we connect with each other. Makes us stronger, not weaker. The battle began when the fleets closed to extreme weapons range. The Devourers opened fire with their bioplasma cannons, weapons that could melt through most known materials. Several human ships took direct hits and should have been destroyed instantly. Instead, they kept fighting. Kethvar watched in amazement as ships with massive hull breaches continued to engage the enemy. Crews that should have been evacuating instead rerouted power to weapon systems and maintained their positions in the battle line. Damage control to bridge, came a voice over the intercom. We lost sections 12 through 15, but engineering managed to reroute power through the backup systems. Weapons at 90% effectiveness. The casual tone in which they reported catastrophic damage was deeply disturbing to Kethvar. Most crews would be in panic mode after losing nearly a quarter of their ship. The humans sounded like they were discussing minor maintenance issues. Pilot Dongyun Choi was performing maneuvers that violated basic physics. The massive warship twisted and spun through three-dimensional space like a small fighter. avoiding weapons fire that should have been unavoidable, while maintaining its own firing solution on multiple targets. "This is incredible," Choi shouted over the noise of straining engines. "The big ones move like they are stuck in mud." "Watch this!" He drove the ship directly between two massive hive ships, using their own bulk to shield his vessel from return fire, while the Teguk's weapons carved through both enemy hulls simultaneously. The maneuver required precise timing and nerves that Kethavar was certain no other species possessed. "Gunner teams report," Minji Kim called over the weapons channel. "Port battery here. We are having so much fun. These targets too easy to miss. Starboard battery ready. Can we try the new ammunition on the big one?" "Forward torpedo room. We modified some warheads with the acid we collected from last time. Want to see what happens?" They were experimenting with new weapons during active combat against overwhelming odds. The tactical insanity of this approach was matched only by its apparent effectiveness. Sergeant Wu Jin Nam appeared on the bridge again, this time leading a team of soldiers carrying equipment that Kethavar did not recognize. "Admiral, boarding teams ready for deployment. We found some interesting things in the wreckage from the last battle." "What kind of things?" Admiral Park asked. "Biological samples, toxins, some kind of nerve agents. We think we can use them against the Devourers." Nam's team was planning to use captured Devourer weapons against their creators. The ethical implications alone should have prevented such actions, but the humans seemed to view it as natural tactical adaptation. Kethavar watched in horror as human boarding parties launched toward the largest enemy vessels. But this time they were not just using conventional weapons. They had somehow weaponized the Devourer's own biological systems against them. The effect on the enemy fleet was immediate and devastating. Ships that had been functioning normally began showing signs of internal system failures. The Devourers were being killed by their own weapons, turned against them by humans who had studied their biology during the previous battle. "How did you learn to do this so quickly?" Kethavar asked. "Humans very good at learning from enemies," Hyunwoo Lee replied. "We study everything that tries to kill us. Then we find ways to kill it better." As the battle continued, Kethavar realized that something fundamental had changed in the human fleet. The casual enthusiasm of the first engagement had evolved into something darker and more focused. They were not just fighting anymore. They were perfecting the art of killing Devourers. The singing had stopped, replaced by efficient communication and tactical coordination that would have impressed the most elite galactic military units. But beneath the professionalism, Kethavar could sense something that made his scales crawl with instinctive fear. The humans were enjoying this more than they had enjoyed the first battle. They were learning, adapting and getting better at killing with every passing minute, and they were having fun doing it. The third battle came without warning. Kethavar was reviewing his notes when the emergency alerts began screaming throughout the ship. Unlike the previous engagements, there was no time to prepare or form up the fleet. The Devourers had learned from their defeats and changed their tactics. Multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace, Tactical Officer Minji Kim announced. "They are appearing inside our formation." Through the bridge viewports, Kethavar could see massive bioships materializing between the human vessels. The Devourers had sacrificed stealth for surprise, catching the fleet scattered across the system while they conducted repairs and resupply operations. "All ships, emergency protocols," Admiral Jinwoo Park commanded. "They want to fight close quarters. Let us show them what that means." What happened next changed everything Kethavar thought he knew about human nature. "Medical Officer Lee to bridge," came the voice over the intercom. "Admiral, request permission to implement Protocol Berserker." Kethavar had never heard this term before, but the way every human on the bridge went silent told him it was significant. "Explain Protocol Berserker to our observer," Admiral Park said. Medical Officer Hyunwoo. Lee's voice came through the communication system with a clinical detachment that was somehow more frightening than excitement. "Combat enhancement drug. Increases aggression, pain tolerance, and reaction time. Also reduces fear response and increases tactical focus under stress." "You drug your soldiers?" Kethavar asked in horror. "Not drug," Lee corrected. "Enhancement. Brings out natural human combat abilities. We developed it after studying our own biology during high-stress situations." Admiral Park considered for a moment, while enemy ships moved closer to the scattered human vessels. "Authorized. All ships implement Protocol Berserker. Let us see what these things do when they face humans at full capability." The change in the crew was immediate and terrifying. Within minutes of the medical teams distributing the enhancement, every human on the bridge began showing signs of physical transformation. Their pupils dilated, their breathing became deeper and more controlled, and their movements took on a predatory grace that made Kethavar's instincts scream warnings. Pilot Donghyun Choi turned in his seat to face the tactical display, and Kethavar barely recognized him. The cheerful young man had been replaced by something that looked at the approaching enemy ships like a hunter studying prey. "Target acquired," Choi said, his voice completely calm despite the impossible odds they faced. "Beginning evasion pattern Omega. All crew secure for aggressive maneuvering." The ship moved in ways that defied its size and mass. Choi threw the massive vessel through a series of turns and rolls that should have pulverized everyone aboard. But somehow the inertial systems compensated. More importantly, every crew member continued working at peak efficiency despite the crushing forces. Minji Kim's weapons control became something beautiful and terrible to watch. Her hands moved across the targeting controls with inhuman speed and precision, designating targets and firing solutions faster than Kethavar could follow. But her face remained completely emotionless, focused on the destruction of everything that threatened her ship. "Weapons free on all targets," she announced. "Estimated time to total enemy destruction 12 minutes. 12 minutes to destroy a fleet that outnumbered them 3-1. The confidence in her voice was not bravado or hope. It was mathematical certainty. Engineer Soo Young-han worked at her station with the same enhanced focus, but her modifications to the ship's systems were beyond anything Kethavar had seen. She was not just maintaining equipment, she was transforming the vessel into something more lethal. "Power output increased 40%, she reported. "Weapon systems enhanced with experimental modifications. Warning, some systems now operating beyond safe parameters." "Define beyond safe parameters," Admiral Park requested. "We might explode," Han replied with no emotion whatsoever. "But we will probably destroy all enemies first." The casual acceptance of potentially fatal risk was becoming normal behavior for the enhanced humans. They were weighing the possibility of their own deaths against tactical advantages and making decisions that terrified Kethavar. Through the ship's internal monitors, he could watch the enhancement spreading through the crew. Soldiers moved through corridors with perfect coordination, their weapons held ready but their faces showing no emotion. They looked like they were sleepwalking, but Kethavar knew they were actually operating at peak human efficiency. The first boarding action came when a Devourer ship managed to breach the Taguk's hull. Alien creatures poured through the gap, expecting to find panicked crew members retreating from their advance. Instead, they found Sergeant Woo Jin Nam and his security team. The humans did not retreat or take defensive positions. They advanced directly into the boarding party with weapons that seemed almost primitive compared to galactic standards, but their effectiveness was devastating. Kethavar watched through security cameras as Nam cleared an entire corridor, using nothing but a magnetic rifle and what appeared to be a metal blade. His movements were fluid and economical, wasting no energy while delivering maximum damage to every target. But the most disturbing part was his complete lack of emotional response. He was killing living creatures with the same mechanical precision that a technician might use to repair equipment. "Boarding party eliminated," Nam reported over the communication system, collecting samples for analysis. Some of these toxins might be useful. They were studying their enemies while killing them, learning from each encounter to become more effective in the next battle. The speed of their adaptation was frightening. Private Jisoo Kwan appeared in another camera feed, single-handedly defending an entire section of the ship against Devourer infiltrators. She had somehow acquired several of their bioweapons and was using them with devastating effectiveness against their original owners. "How did she learn to use those weapons so quickly?" Kethavar asked. "Humans very good at learning," Admiral Park replied, his enhanced focus never leaving the tactical display, especially when learning means staying alive. The battle continued with the humans demonstrating capabilities that should not have been possible. Ships that were outnumbered and outgunned were systematically destroying larger enemy forces through pure tactical superiority and enhanced human reflexes. "Commander Tae-hyung," Bay's voice came over the fleet communication channel. "Admiral, we have captured a live queen from one of the hive ships." "Request instructions, a live queen?" Kethavar asked in disbelief. The Devourer Queens are the most dangerous creatures in known space. They can control multiple ships telepathically, and their bioweapons can kill anything organic. Admiral Park smiled for the first time since the enhancement had been administered, and the expression was more frightening than his previous emotionless focus. "Commander Bay," he said, "bring her aboard. Medical Officer Lee wants to study how their telepathic control works. We might be able to use it." The idea of humans attempting to use Devourer telepathic abilities was beyond terrifying. It suggested that they were not content with simply defeating their enemies. They wanted to understand them, learn from them, and potentially become them. As the battle reached its conclusion with total human victory, Kethvar realized that Protocol Berserker had not made the humans more aggressive or violent. It had simply removed the limitations they normally placed on themselves. The cheerful, enthusiastic soldiers he had observed in previous battles had been holding back. The enhancement had not changed their nature. It had revealed what they truly were when those restraints were removed. They were not just warriors. They were predators who had spent millions of years learning to hunt the most dangerous prey in the universe, each other. The pursuit began 18 hours after the third battle ended. Kethvar expected the human fleet to remain in the system to consolidate their victories and await reinforcements. Instead, Admiral Jinwoo Park ordered an immediate pursuit of the surviving Devourer ships that had fled into deep space. "Sir," Kethvar protested, "standard military doctrine requires securing the battlefield before advancing. You have wounded crew members and damaged ships." "Observer," Admiral Park replied, his voice still carrying the cold focus of the enhancement drugs. "Humans learned long ago that wounded prey is dangerous prey. Better to finish the hunt while they are still running." The human fleet had been transformed by their successive victories. Ships that had started as crude but functional vessels now bristled with weapons and equipment salvaged from defeated enemies. The modifications were disturbing in their creativity. Engineer Soo-Young Han had somehow integrated Devourer bioweapons into the ship's defensive systems. Living creatures that had once tried to consume human vessels now served as organic shields. Their own defensive abilities turned against their former allies. "How did you manage to control them?" Kethvar asked as he watched tentacle-like appendages extending from the ship's hull to grab debris and enemy fragments. "Same way humans always control dangerous animals," Han replied with no emotion. "We make it more afraid of us than anything else." The modification of human ships was only part of the transformation. The crew members had also changed in ways that Kethvar found increasingly disturbing. Medical Officer Hyunwoo Lee no longer resembled the calm professional Kethvar had first met. The enhancement drugs had been modified based on his study of captured Devourer biology, and the results were visible in his appearance and behavior. "We learned interesting things from the queen we captured," Lee explained while showing Kethvar through the medical bay. "Their telepathic abilities come from specialized neural structures. We cannot replicate them exactly, but we can enhance human intuition and tactical awareness." The medical bay itself had been expanded using space taken from other ship sections. Instead of treating wounded soldiers, Lee was conducting experiments on captured Devourer specimens while simultaneously developing new enhancement drugs for the human crew. "You are using their own biology against them," Kethvar observed. "Of course," Lee replied. "Humans always been good at taking useful things from enemies. Why should this be different?" The pursuit itself was unlike any military operation Kethvar had documented. Most species would follow fleeing enemies at a safe distance, gathering intelligence and waiting for reinforcements. The humans were hunting. Pilot Dongyan Choi had become something that could barely be called human anymore. Multiple enhancement treatments had changed his reflexes and perception to the point where he could track enemy ships through hyperspace using intuition and pattern recognition that no normal being should possess. "Target group detected," he announced. 15 ships moving toward the Vega system. They think they can hide in the nebula there." "How can you know that?" Kethvar asked. "Human hunters learn to think like prey," Choi replied. "We know where they go because we know how they think when they run." The accuracy of his predictions was proven when the fleet arrived at the Vega system to find the Devourer ships exactly where he had expected them. But instead of a tactical engagement, what followed was something that Kethvar could only describe as recreational slaughter. Tactical Officer Minji, Kim had replaced her standard targeting systems with modified equipment that seemed designed more for entertainment than efficiency. Instead of destroying enemy ships quickly, she was disabling their engines and weapons, leaving them helpless while the human fleet moved on to other targets. "Why are you not finishing them?" Kethvar asked. "More fun this way," Kim replied, and for the first time since the enhancement began, she showed emotion. She was smiling. "Let them float here and think about what happened to them. Maybe some other devourers find them and learn what happens when they hunt humans." The casual cruelty of leaving enemies alive and helpless was more disturbing than quick destruction would have been. It suggested that the humans were no longer fighting for survival or territory. They were fighting for pleasure. Sergeant Wu Jin Nam had become the most changed of all the crew members. His security teams no longer looked like soldiers. They looked like a pack of hunters who had found the perfect prey. "We collected more specimens from the disabled ships," he reported to Admiral Park. "These ones have different bioweapons than the others. Medical Officer Lee wants to study how they work." "Take what you need," Admiral Park authorized. "Leave the rest for the scavengers." The idea of using living enemies for medical experiments violated every principle of civilized warfare, but the humans seemed to consider it normal battlefield behavior. They were not just defeating the devourers, they were learning everything possible about their biology and capabilities. The chase continued across 3-star systems. Each time the devourer survivors tried to regroup or establish defensive positions, the human fleet appeared with perfect timing to disrupt their efforts. What had started as a military pursuit was becoming a systematic extermination campaign. But the most disturbing change was in the humans themselves. Gunner Yeben Park had begun decorating her weapons station with trophies taken from destroyed enemy ships. Pieces of devourer armor and bioweapons hung from the walls like hunting trophies, and she spoke about them with the pride of a collector. "This one from the first hive ship we boarded," she explained to Kethvar. "This piece from the queen we captured, and this." She held up a fragment that pulsed with organic light. "This from the biggest ship we killed yesterday." "Why do you keep these things?" Kethvar asked. "Humans always keep trophies from good hunts," Park replied. "Helps us remember what we accomplished. Also, makes good conversation when we get home." The casual way she discussed killing sentient beings as a recreational activity was deeply disturbing. The humans were no longer treating this as a military operation. It had become sport. The final confrontation came when the last group of devourer survivors reached what they thought was a safe system. They had called for reinforcements and were preparing to make a final stand against their human pursuers. Instead of the desperate battle they expected, the humans arrived with modifications that defied understanding. The fleet had been transformed into something that barely resembled the ships Kethvar had first boarded. Bioweapons grew from their hulls like living plants. Captured devourer technology had been integrated into their systems. Most disturbing of all, the humans had somehow learned to use the enemy's own telepathic abilities against them. "How is this possible?" Kethvar asked as he watched human crews coordinate their attacks through some form of shared consciousness. "We learned from the Queen," Medical Officer Lee explained. "Human brains very adaptable. With right modifications, we can do anything they can do, only better." The battle that followed was not a military engagement. It was an execution. The human fleet moved with perfect coordination, each ship knowing exactly where the others would be and what they would do. The devourers, who had terrorized the galaxy for centuries, were systematically destroyed by beings who had learned to outthink them, outfight them, and out-evolve them. When the last enemy ship exploded under concentrated human fire, Admiral Park made an announcement that chilled Kethvar to his core. "All ships, excellent work. Signal Earth Command that the devourer threat in this sector has been eliminated. Request new assignments. Crew reports high morale and readiness for additional hunting operations." They were asking for more enemies to fight. The humans had not just defeated the devourers. They had enjoyed it so much that they wanted to do it again. As the fleet began its journey back to human space, Kethvar realized that his observations had revealed something far more terrifying than an effective military force. He had witnessed the emergence of a species that had evolved beyond the need for survival-based violence. The humans fought because they loved it.